General Phahlane has been in the hot seat since 11 a.m. and he has been dropping bomb after bomb after bomb. My jaw is literally on the ground. And some of his allegations include that channel favorite Paul O'Sullivan allegedly has a criminal record, and that pertains to an alleged assault on his wife.
Thank you very much. I think I missed the general a little bit. Who is the person who assaulted the wife and paid a fine of guilt?
Paul O'Sullivan.
Paul O'Sullivan.
Yeah.
But in the records, the criminal record register, there is no criminal record against him.
I happen to be the Divisional Commissioner for Forensic Services. Criminal records are housed in the Criminal Record Center,
Yes.
which I am a custodian at the time, and
Yes.
they never reflected that he had the criminal record.
So did you pick up if whether it was registered and removed or it was never registered at all? You remember the issue of KwaZulu-Natal of Gerald Mkhwanazi and the other police official giving the nation details about criminal records being removed from the register?
Honorable Member, I only got to know about that criminal case much later. I was already not in the system.
Okay.
And then, I've stepped aside.
Additionally, he has also claimed and reinforced General Mkhwanazi's claims of that bad wing of IDAC.
To what in the statement is referred to the Paul O'Sullivan and Torach. So are you saying one of the then recognized IPID officials is currently in the employ of IDAC?
It's correct. That's why I support General Mkhwanazi when he's talking about the rogue unit within IDAC. Mati Binang is a member currently, as we speak.
Can I move that the committee be furnished with the name of the said individual? Thank you.
The witness hears you. What is the name of that?
Imani Binang.
Temane.
Temane. And the surname is Binang. Binang.
And we are going to get into it because these are just the tip of a very big iceberg. Now remember to immediately hit that like and subscribe button and let me know if you watched that testimony and if you found it as explosive as I did. Now, what if South Africa's top cop was never meant to become permanent? Not because of incompetence, but because of someone powerful. Someone powerful who decided that he couldn't be controlled. In January 2026, Parliament reopened one of the most dangerous fault lines in South African policing. And at the center of it all, Lieutenant General Phahlane, a man who once ran the SAPS, now claiming that he was illegally pushed out, that he was politically sabotaged, and targeted by a coordinated smear campaign that destroyed his career. And the names that he spilt and the tea that he spilt, the names all mentioned in his affidavit and under oath. They've shaken South Africa and Parliament to its core. Now, before we get into it, we have to understand the man behind the allegations. And Lieutenant General Phahlane was appointed acting National Commissioner of the SAPS in October 2015 after the suspension of the previous National Commissioner. For nearly 2 years, he sat in the most powerful law enforcement seat in the country. But instead of confirmation, remember he was acting, there came conflict. So he was suspended in 2017 and then eventually dismissed in August 2020. And ever since then, Phahlane has insisted, taking his battle to the courts, claiming whatever happened to me was unlawful. Now, nearly a decade later, he's back, not in uniform, but under oath before Parliament. Now, my impressions of the man. First of all, this is a highly educated man. He has been a career police officer since 1985. Additionally, he has a wall full of degrees and certificates. And he has worked in, I think, pretty much every aspect of the police. We know he was in forensics, that he was also in surveillance, he was in crime intelligence, he was in visible policing, he was in human resources. He has a good understanding of how the SAPS functions. Now, immediately, I came across, in my own opinion, of a man who was trying to clear his name. And he was adamantly doing it and trying to do it before the people of South Africa. Him and the evidence leader, they came into conflict a few times. I get the feeling that these two men do not like each other. I do not know why. But what I do understand from General Phahlane's testimony is that he is a man who adamantly wants to clear his name, and he believes that whatever did to him was wrong. Now, when Phahlane arrived in front of the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee, he did not do it quietly. He arrived with one central claim, a claim that he repeated throughout the day, that there was a coordinated agenda to remove him. And he makes direct allegations. This man does not mince his words. According to him, the former police minister, Mr. Mdluli, had no legal authority to order him to step aside because, remember, this is the part that we've dealt with General Mkhwanazi's allegations, is that the police minister is a purely political role. They shouldn't have interfering power into the national commissioner. Now, according to Phahlane, no lawful suspension process was followed, labor law was violated, and administrative justice was ignored. He is now fighting this in the Labour Appeals Court, arguing that his dismissal was both procedurally unfair and substantially unlawful. But then Parliament hears something that is even more disturbing. So last year we had Cedrick Nkabinde, former Chief of Staff of Police Minister Mkhwanazi. We also know that he was working as an IPID officer. This is important because this is where the two men's paths are going to meet. You have Cedrick Nkabinde working as an IPID officer, and he was investigating General Phahlane. Now, under oath, Nkabinde tells Parliament a task team was deliberately created to ensure Phahlane would never become the permanent national commissioner. And then he drops that bomb. Nkabinde claimed that a meeting took place at the home of forensic investigator Paul O'Sullivan, and this is a property that is alleged to have once belonged to fugitive Radovan Krejcir, and the alleged purpose of this meeting was a plot to bring down Phahlane. Now, Nkabinde alleges that the following attended. These include Paul O'Sullivan, Robert McBride, and late IPID investigator, which is Mr. Mkhwanazi. And Cedrick Nkabinde was also present. He was then the head of the Gauteng Hawks. Whenever Mr. Nkabinde comes in, I always raise an eyebrow and I get a bit concerned about what's happening. And we also have individuals linked to political parties, civil societies, and crime intelligence, Candace from crime intelligence, and even journalists. Now, it is important to note that these allegations have not been tested in court. The political party named is the DA, and the civil society named is AfriForum. But the damage that these allegations had was immediate, because remember, Nkabinde was getting into it about Paul O'Sullivan. He alleges that Paul O'Sullivan conducted surveillance on Phahlane, that he influenced investigations via IPID and the MPA, and he could not control Phahlane. That was the reason, unlike the others. And he even claims that 2 criminal dockets involving O'Sullivan was stalled, and one docket was allegedly removed from a black prosecutor. Again, these are just allegations only. No court has ruled on this. But then the story flips back because we know that O'Sullivan strikes back. Paul O'Sullivan responded with one word, and that was perjury. He laid a perjury charge against Cedrick Nkabinde, and nothing was mentioned about that alleged threat that he made to Cedrick Nkabinde during the testimony. His position is absolute. No meeting took place, no plotting occurred, no spying happened, and he has no control over the SAPS, IPID, or the NPA. And that has never existed. And he says these claims are knowingly false, defamatory, and delivered under oath, and therefore criminal. Now, Cedrick Nkabinde's claims stem from an incident that happened according to Cedrick Nkabinde and General Phahlane. And this happened between 2016 and 2017. And this is known as the Phahlane versus IPID war, that I'm going to name it. And General Phahlane has come before South Africa and he has reinforced those claims made by Cedrick Nkabinde. And he said that basically, at the center of this is you have a couple of players. You have the acting National Police Commissioner, Phahlane. You have the head of the police watchdog, which is Robert McBride. You have a private forensic investigator, Paul O'Sullivan, and allegations so serious that we are still talking about them nearly 10 years later. And basically what happened is that in 2016, complaints were formally lodged against Phahlane. And guess who the complainant was? A Mr. Paul O'Sullivan. These allegations included irregular procurement in SAPS forensic services, oversupply of equipment, centralized procurement authority, as well as inappropriate relationships with service providers. IPID formally accepted the complaints and opened investigations. Now, doesn't this sound familiar to something else that we investigated on this channel? Go and watch the Paul O'Sullivan versus General Khomotso, and you will be, your jaw will drop, because this is straight out of the same playbook. Guess who compiled the dossier in that case as well and handed it over? So that is just something that is just very interesting to me. And we have that IPID formally accepted these complaints, right? And then by 2017, both Phahlane and McBride were summoned before Parliament. And basically what followed was chaos. So IPID investigators claim that their work was being actively undermined by Phahlane. The allegations that witnesses were instructed not to cooperate with Phahlane, threats were sent to IPID investigators, and these threats were traced back, one to OR Tambo and one to a police station. Then came the most controversial claim of them all, that SAPS had formed an internal team to investigate IPID itself. A direct constitutional contradiction. Now, the alleged internal team was reportedly led by a General Mabula. IPID alleged that witnesses already interviewed by them were then re-interviewed by General Mabula. Investigations were duplicated and disrupted, and Paul O'Sullivan was unlawfully arrested. The core criticism: the police cannot investigate the police watchdog. If true, IPID's constitutional independence was neutralized. Now, I just want to insert something in here quickly. So, Paul O'Sullivan, when he was arrested, there is a certain High Court judge by the name of Aubrey Ledwaba. And Aubrey Ledwaba is the same High Court judge that is accused by one of the witnesses in the Madlanga Commission, I think it might be witness B, for allegedly accepting a bribe from Katie Malefe in order to have him given bail. Now, this is the same judge that issued a High Court order that said that Paul O'Sullivan must be given notice. I think it is 48 hours notice if someone wants to arrest him. How come he gets such special treatment? I have never heard of anyone being given notice for an impending arrest. Isn't that the point of an arrest, when you arrest someone so that they can't get rid of perhaps incriminating evidence, among other things? I mean, part of the reason why you arrest someone is to take them by surprise. That is why, you have these COVID operations. So that's just a little bit of food for thought. So O'Sullivan was charged with impersonating an IPID officer, participating unlawfully in investigations. And IPID's official position was O'Sullivan was not an IPID official. He was a private citizen, as he still maintains to this day, and he was the original complainant. Now, the lines between complainant and investigator and target become blurred beyond recognition, because O'Sullivan allegedly provided McBride with a detailed dossier on Phahlane. McBride in turn warned Phahlane that there were attempts to remove him, claimed media pressure was being mobilized, and that the media have all the power, and allegedly stated that they are journalists that hold power. McBride later met Phahlane directly, and he warned him allegedly about the then police minister and suggested cooperation. Phahlane later claims journalists were working against me. In May 2016, Phahlane's building contractor called him. 4 men had arrived, and they were asking questions. They were demanding to see plans to his house. One allegedly identified himself as Paul O'Sullivan, and they claimed to be IPID investigators. So this is critical because O'Sullivan is not part of IPID staff. His driver later confirmed a similar account, that is Phahlane's driver, and then Phahlane would go on to meet with McBride and Cedrick Nkabinde. Like I said, whenever Nkabinde comes in, I have to raise an eyebrow and I have to go, whoa. And he asked one question: what is the role that Paul O'Sullivan is playing? And then Phahlane got a call from Cedrick Nkabinde. Remember, he was that IPID investigator at the time, and he said that he would like to meet because there's an investigation into Phahlane over defeating the ends of justice, and a meeting was scheduled, but then Phahlane says that he had to postpone it, and when Phahlane didn't arrive, then he got requests from a journalist, and then after that, there was him all over the papers saying that he is a no-show at an IPID probe. And shortly after this, another criminal case was opened, allegedly relating to all the vehicles that he owned. Now, Phahlane denied appointing any team to investigate IPID. He claims instead that because Paul O'Sullivan and Sarah Jane Trent, who allegedly works for him, was seen with IPID investigators in his security complex, and they allegedly went to ask questions of the security personnel about, for example, some of the questions were, how many protectors does Phahlane have? What they wanted to see the plans of his house, and there were other things about what guns they had, where did they guard, among other things. And Phahlane claimed that it was crime intelligence who was conducting a threat assessment on him because they thought that there was a credible threat to his life. And then detectives were appointed because crime intelligence doesn't investigate. Detectives were then appointed via Northwest Province. And then it was said that General Mabula, he said, remember the person who was heading that task team investigating the people who were investigating Phahlane, was not his appointment. Now, Phahlane then also pulled out another channel favorite name, Andrea Johnson, because he claimed that General Mabula met within his team of detectives, met with Advocate Andrea Johnson at the time, as well as another advocate, and they said that O'Sullivan would be prosecuted for this, for impersonating an IPID officer. And this is something that he says Johnson denies any knowledge of when she appeared in front of the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee. Now, further allegations that were leveled against Paul O'Sullivan include that he investigated alongside IPID officers, impersonating them, and there was this group of 5 individuals that were in his security complex, in Phahlane's security complex, and only 2 of them were IPID members, and the rest were private citizens. And one of those IPID members, one has passed on, but the other one has gone on to work in IDAC. And remember, General Mkhwanazi was telling us about that alleged rogue wing in IDAC. And Lieutenant General Phahlane is saying, this is it. This is where the rogue element is working. And at the time, IPID leadership included Robert McBride, and an IPID investigator allegedly linked to O'Sullivan would go on to join IDAC. And later we know that General Mkhwanazi referred publicly to a rogue unit within IDAC.
I say this divided into two sections. I made an example yesterday and I invited the members to do the profile of an arresting officer of the members of crime intelligence. You're going to know that he's an ex-crime intelligence member. And when you look at what IDAC is supposed to deal with, then you ask yourself whether does this investigating officer, Mr. Padayache, fits the profile of being appointed at IDAC to first place. Whether does he have qualifications, skills, and everything to do with investigation to deal with such sensitive cases that the legislature was intended to be done by IDAC. That's a point of departure that you're going to see that is people that were just moved. That's the first thing. Secondly, you look at the number of cases that are within IPID or they were within IPID when Mr. Sesoko was still the boss, head of investigation at IPID. And how many of those case dockets were moved from IPID to IDAC? And what was the reason for such movement? And that's another reason why I'm saying that. And thirdly, you look at just a profile of all the cases IDAC is dealing with, and you take that entire caseload, you compare with the establishment of IDAC, and you see whether a typical example of the arrest of an appointment of an officials within crime intelligence of who's going to earn a salary over a period of 12 months of just over R1 million, does it meet the requirements of what IDAC was established for?
Now, Phahlane questioned why Paul O'Sullivan possesses a licensed 9mm firearm when he allegedly had a criminal record for a GBV assault and that he allegedly paid an admission of guilt fine. The question is raised, how is this not reflected on the SAPS system? Well, I suggest if you want to know how, then a good episode to reference would be to go and watch my episode, I'll link it below, on how criminal records get deleted from the SAPS system and they only get picked up on the back audit. General Phahlane even went on to go and reference Paul O'Sullivan's book. This man, he knows his stuff. From what I understood from his testimony today, he came before us with an almost 200-page affidavit. He had his two advocates sitting behind him. He had Paul O'Sullivan's book. He was ready to spill all the tea. Now, inside it, he showed us a photograph of Paul O'Sullivan with a senior SAPS officer as well as with a police officer from overseas. And this senior SAPS officer is now head of the cold case division and is actively involved in the Sensor Mayowa murder investigation. Now, remember when Witness A and Witness B were trying to protect that docket that they had against KT Malefe. Now, remember when Witness A and Witness B were trying to protect that docket that they were building into the murder of Armand Swart and the evidence they had against the hitman and KT Malefe. Well, remember that there was a request that was put in to see that docket by the cold case investigation unit, and we don't know who from the cold case investigate put in that request, but this is a point of interest that I'm going to link back to. And I just think that there perhaps might be a thread here that we need to tug at a bit more. The implication that is raised in Parliament is that Paul O'Sullivan has access to senior police figures that went far beyond that of a private citizen. Again, implication is not a finding, but we have to take note of these things. One of the most damaging moments comes from how questions were handled. So IPID officers, when they were questioning witnesses, they allegedly sent questions to Sarah Jane Trent. She is an associate of Paul O'Sullivan, and she allegedly replied, "I will check with Paul O'Sullivan." So we have a private, if this is true, we have a private citizen who is influencing questions intended for a national police commissioner in an independent oversight investigation. This strikes at the heart of IPID's constitutional mandate. Now, we know that Paul O'Sullivan was arrested for these alleged charges of impersonating an IPID officer. So we know that Paul O'Sullivan was arrested around this time that we are talking about, when all these allegations are going on. Remember, according to Phahlane's testimony, the head of the investigation who was investigating Paul O'Sullivan went to Andrea Johnson, and Andrea Johnson said that there's enough to prosecute. Now, Paul O'Sullivan is arrested and Sarah Jane Trent is arrested, and both are later released by court order. And O'Sullivan is arrested outside of AfriForum offices in Pretoria, and the charges include fraud, intimidation, extortion. And it is ruled that the matter is struck off the roll. And we also know that the prosecutor is denied permission to amend an earlier order, which is quite unusual in my own opinion. We have to go into another side quest here, and that is where interference in crime intelligence and the Richard Mdluli saga. So to understand Phahlane's allegations that appointments were politically manipulated, we have to confront an older, darker case from 2012. And then a familiar channel name is going to drop. Acting National Police Commissioner General Mkhwanazi makes a move that is unexpected. He issues in 2012 7-day notices to Richard Mdluli and his ally Solly Lazarus. They are ordered to explain why they should not be suspended again. Inside SAPS, this read as open defiance because powerful forces wanted Mdluli investigation to be buried permanently. And one of those alleged forces is a certain Nathi Mthethwa, a man whose death last year in Paris has raised a few eyebrows. So just weeks earlier, before General Mkhwanazi made this warning, Mdluli and Lazarus had been quietly reinstated. And a meeting that included General Mkhwanazi, Police Minister Nathi Mthethwa, and Inspector General of Intelligence Faith Radabi. Now, according to what happened there at that meeting, General Mkhwanazi, he wanted to prosecute Richard Mdluli for allegedly accessing that slush fund. But basically that he was blocked from doing this by then Police Minister Nathi Mthethwa and Inspector General of Intelligence Faith Radabi. So I will see if I can clip in his allegations here where he explains it.
Honorable Chair, honorable members, people will say Mkhwanazi is very insensitive, but when we talk the honest truth, we must tell the truth. The country was in pain to listen to how much of money was spent at the former president's house, homestead at Ingatla, because there was an accountability that was happening at the time. But this government has never paid attention on the amount of expenditure that was incurred by crime intelligence over years. Interrogate that within the Secret Service account, the misuse of the Secret Service account. Obviously, the Joint Standing Committee is supposed to do that. It's disturbing when reports supposed to be presented to such structures to hold people accountable. That thing happens to it. We are sitting today, the country is in mourning because we lost one of our ambassadors in France. But then ambassador was a minister of police. As you switch on the television and you watch the homestead of the former minister of police, you're going to see a very big wall. Perimeter wall that was built by the money from crime intelligence. But nobody was held accountable for such, and the reports are there. So 2011, we're experiencing all these things. It's members from crime intelligence that takes the money out of crime intelligence to use intelligence that takes the money out of crime intelligence to use them to take control of the executive authority. The minister never asked for the wall. The members from crime intelligence took the money secret fund account to make that wall so they can get control of the minister. So tomorrow they can then loot that money on their own. Then the minister can't say anything. It's the same thing bringing us here today. Minister of Police, Minister Mkhwanazi, was made to sign a letter by the raw people within the organization. They might have done something to him. He signs a letter, he committed himself, and today he's in trouble because of that. Had he not signed that letter, he would not have been here. So some of the executive officials or authorities that are arriving in the South African Police Service, they had no bad intentions. But the rogue within catches them. They take control of them and they do as they please after that. So as one of the things that I will recommend, Honorable Chair, defense intelligence, state security does not account to the open committees in Parliament. Perhaps we might want to start looking as Parliament on crime intelligence. They've got two accounts of budget is allocated to them, open budget and the COVID budget. Every time when you come to Parliament, there's always this confusion as to what you say on this, what you don't say on that. Because there are questions that are coming from Parliament that talks about COVID issues. They should be discussed in another protocol committee, but they are expected to be discussed in this open committee. You can forgive some of the parliamentarian members, they don't know that. They're going to know about a house that was built or bought. They throw questions and they want you to explain that. They don't know that belongs in another committee. Although you have members of the Portfolio Committee of Police who deliberately, knowing, having taken an oath, that they will never divulge the secrets of the state in public. Members that are part of the Joint Standing Committee of Intelligence who are supposed to keep the secrets there. And if they ask questions, they must ask in that line. They don't ask questions. I mean, if I digress a bit, Commissioner, honorable members, the member of Parliament that I referred to before went out in the public and said, no, when I asked these questions, there was no Joint Standing Committee of Intelligence. And the member asked me to apologize in the national TV. I told everyone else that told me about that I will apologize to the honorable member. I'm apologizing that the honorable member had forgotten the oath that she took. I forgot, I apologize for it. That she took an oath, that oath has got an expiry date according to her. That this one is valid only for the period when the Joint Standing Committee exists. When a Joint Standing Committee doesn't exist, that oath that she took, it expires. The honorable member that forget that she took an oath before South Africans in Parliament not to divulge the secret of government. And she forgot about the oath. I apologize for that she forgot that oath. And she asked the questions in February and the likes. But I must also apologize that the honorable member forgot that in April, May this year, she took an oath as a member of the Joint Standing Committee of Intelligence. But she still comes to the Portfolio Committee of Police and asks questions about the secret fund account. 3 questions that the police had to respond to her and say, sorry, ma'am, this does not belong here. The chairperson of the Portfolio Committee of Police knows that because I did share with him. This I shared because she denied the initial statement. Then I wanted to prove that it didn't only end there. I only made reference to some few things, not all. So there are many examples, Honorable Chair and members, that one can put, but amongst these recommendations that are put in here, one of them that maybe I didn't write is really to interrogate whether is it necessary for crime intelligence to account in an open committee? Perhaps that's where the problem comes from. Because state security don't hear much about this. Not to say things are hunky-dory that side. Defense intelligence don't hear anything about this. But crime intelligence always in the middle. Why? It's because you have a Portfolio Committee of Police that holds them accountable. So perhaps the budget must just be moved covertly, all of it, so that it goes to one committee, Joint Standing Committee, being handled there. Whether good or bad, but it is regarded as a covert fund completely. So that is one of the addition if we were to include Honorable Chair and honorable members on these recommendations. But maybe to narrate on some of those that are here, Honorable Chair and members, I had requested on the first one that the South African Police Service senior management, and I hope the honorable members know where the senior managers in the police start from, is brigadiers and high. once you become a brigadier and higher, at least there must be a lifestyle audit that is conducted to all of us. And it must not be a once-off thing. And it must not be done by the police. The committee might want to find an independent entity to do that. And the report be given to a chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Police, and then it can be elevated to Parliament. But basically, the employment condition of a police officer needs to be conditional. It cannot be just a permanent thing. You come in, you work until you retire at 60, whether you are delivering or not delivering, whether you are rogue or not rogue, you just enjoy your salary every single day. We have to review that. So lifestyle audit is what I'm calling for. We all must be subjected to that so that you get to understand, where does Mkhwanazi get the money to buy the suit? Can he afford it? And many other things that we have as police management. And I will also request that perhaps the committee, ad hoc committee through Parliament, really look at the vetting process or the employment condition in the police, because when, I don't know if honorable members knows the levels of vetting. You have confidential things, you have secret things, you have top secret, and those different levels. It is a given thing to say everyone must be given a top secret. And I don't think it's classified. What is it that this country regards as a top secret? And therefore, who must have access to it? Because the moment you regard something as a top secret, it means it's something that if you reveal that to the public, it's got a potential of undermining the security of the state. It must be highest level of order that you can get, top secret. So it can't be everyone that gets it. When you come and look at the police, how many people that were expected to get top secret, some of them you really ask yourself a question, is it necessary? Does this person really have to get into the top secret? There's no classification, categorization of this a post level, a post that the person is occupying, and what type of classification must be there. So I think there's a standard that needs to be set.
This matters because basically General Mkhwanazi, according to his own words, is blocked from prosecuting them. So civil rights group Freedom Under Law doesn't accept this, and they go to court, and they launch an urgent High Court application demanding Mdluli's suspension and a judicial review of how these charges against him were withdrawn. And the minister attempts to damage control. Mdluli is temporarily transferred out of crime intelligence, and it changes nothing because the court action proceeds. Now, Freedom Under Law releases a 24-page report compiled by a Hawks investigative, Kobus Rulofse, and what it describes is chilling, that investigators placed under surveillance who were investigating Richard Mdluli, does this sound familiar, that direct death threats against officers happened probing the murder case that he was allegedly involved with, and forced reassignment of cases due to intimidation, interference escalating when probes expanded into misuse of Secret Service funds, that slush fund, and a whistleblower under Solly Lazarus being placed in witness protection. This was no rogue operation. This was a systemic shutdown of the investigation. And the report directly points to prosecutorial manipulation. Remember, General Mkhwanazi said that the MPA has also been captured. And the then head of Specialized Commercial Crimes Unit, Mr. Lawrence Murwebi, he allegedly withdrew fraud charges against prosecutors' advice, ignored warnings that the case was strong, ordered withdrawal on a Sunday, much like a disbandment letter on the 31st of December, claimed police lacked mandates, and allegedly informed Mdluli before informing the prosecutors. And initially, charges were provisional, and later, without warning, they became final. Senior prosecutors who objected, including Glenys Breitenbach, a familiar face, were later suspended. To many, this looked like retaliation. So this is where the threads converge, because Phahlane alleges that Mdluli's appointment was political interference, and with the Mdluli case showing that charges are withdrawn despite evidence and investigators threatened and prosecutors overridden, this wasn't hypothetical interference. It was documented. And the Mdluli saga represents one of the gravest accountability failures in South African policing. It demonstrates how national security claims were weaponized, how investigators investigations were deliberately buried, and how independence was punished, how power protected itself. General Mkhwanazi's renewed action showed resistance, and this is just a glimmer of the defiance that General Mkhwanazi showed in 2012 that he would later do on the 6th of July 2025, when he would come before South Africa and tell us what was going on. Now, we are going to end with what happened at the start of today. And that is about General Phahlane and the sagas that he has been involved with. So when he appears before Parliament, he doesn't appear with bullets or talking points. He appeared with 168 pages of sworn affidavit, exhaustive, detailed, and clearly identified to do one thing: put his version of history permanently on record. From the outset, Phahlane is assertive, he is combative with the evidence leader, and he is emotionally charged, especially towards the evidence leader, who he repeatedly challenges. I noted that his command of facts is strong, his memory is precise, he knew exactly what was going on with all his cases, but his delivery is defensive and emotional. And this fits in with someone, in my own opinion, who has been falsely accused. And they want to put their side of the story on the record no matter what. And while the intensity underscores how deeply he feels wrongs, it may not have helped with his credibility initially, but he became less combative as the day went on. This was not a calm man defending a resume. This was a man who was fighting for his name and his legacy. Now, he makes a striking admission. He says that Cedrick Nkabinde said was the truth. And this matters because, like I said, we have Cedrick Nkabinde's testimony and now you have Phahlane's testimony, and they are reinforcing each other. And Phahlane also expresses deep resentment towards the Zondo Commission. He says that the commission came and went and that he was never called, and he would have welcomed the chance to clear his name publicly. To him, this was not an oversight, it was an exclusion. Now, Phahlane reminds Parliament of who he was before the scandals broke. He joined the SAPS in 1985. Over decades, he worked in crime intelligence, visible policing, detectives, communications, human resources. He lists certificates, degrees, management qualifications. He is building a case. He is building a case for the career policeman that he is. On the 14th of October 2015, he is appointed by Acting National Commissioner under former President Jacob Zuma. And this was how the appointment was made at the time, and we know that the way the appointments work now is different. And on the 1st of June 2017, Phahlane is instructed to step aside by Police Minister Vukile Mabalula, and his response is in front of Parliament. He said that he did it because of the media attention, but that the minister had no legal authority. We know this from General Mkhwanazi's testimony about how these layers work. Remember, a minister is not supposed to interfere with the national commissioner, because this is how our constitution was set up, and that no lawful suspension process was followed. And what stings the most, he said, is the public celebration. And he even referenced comments by Julius Malema, which he views as proof that this was political hostility and not a lawful process. Now, he claims that the disciplinary case against him was manufactured. It had initially 11 charges, which were reduced to 3. And he claims that he was never formally asked to plead. The disciplinary rules changed midstream, and the matter was shifted to an expedition process under a Lieutenant General Reid, and he argues that the process was misapplied and it was unfair, and it should never have applied to him. Critically, what is noted by the evidence leader is that he did not object at the time, a fact that would later weigh heavily against him. So in 2023, Phahlane loses his unfair dismissal case in Johannesburg Labour Court. The court finds that his October 2020 dismissal was lawful, and he intentionally or negligently breached the Public Finance Management Act. And this is not a technical loss, this is a decisive judgment. So let's get into the heart of this Labour judgment. This is a 46 million rand SAPS contract for panoramic forensic camera equipment. Now, the findings are that the SAPS contracted with Intemba Forensic Group. Phahlane later refused to honor the agreement, and he ignored a technical report by a Dr. Marcus Weiss, an image software expert. His refusal caused 24 million rand in fruitless and wasteless expenditure, and the court rejects his justification. The money was later repurposed, but the breach stood. Now, in Phahlane's version of this case, he has basically become a never-ending legal nightmare. He is waiting for an appeal to come through that would be delivered, he said, this or next week. And his argument that basically that the cameras that they had, that they were going to buy, were where this tender was awarded for, that the cameras were insufficient. So he spoke with forensics people, and they needed cameras that were recording at 360 degrees at all time. These cameras that were being sold were recording at multiple 90-degree angles, and then the image was stitched together. And he said that this would not be accepted in court. So he was not going to waste taxpayer money on this. And he said the reason that the tender had been awarded because the person in charge of the tender was not a forensics expert. So the person who was involved in awarding the tender did not know what cameras would be used for court. And he insists that he refused to authorize the contract, and his expertise justified the refusal, and he wasn't going to buy cameras that didn't work, and he ended up saving the SAPS 92 million. And there was a settlement that was later approved. He was out of office by someone who came in after him. And he says he cannot be blamed for decisions that were taken after he was removed from office. There was a settlement with that company because they issued a letter of demand saying, hey, listen, we've been awarded that tender. Why haven't you bought our cameras? So Phahlane paints himself as a scapegoat, a victim of political hostility, a career officer undone by process abuse. Now, this is not a story about guilt. These are all just allegations here. This is about a war that is happening within the SAPS police, a power struggle. And we have to ask the questions because no one else is doing it. Why is Paul O'Sullivan so involved in the SAPS if he is a private citizen? Why does he have so many fingers in so many police pies? And we have to ask ourselves whether police power was weaponized, whether journalists were weaponized. There have been allegations that journalists have been weaponized to create stories against people such as General Phahlane, and whether Parliament has been told the truth, because Parliament is a representative of us. So if we are being told the truth, and we know that we are going to be hearing from Robert McBride next week. We are doing General Khumalo tomorrow and Friday, and we haven't heard anything about Paul O'Sullivan and Brown Mkhwanazi. They are set to appear, I think, the week afterwards, but we're going to see if it's going to be physically or virtually. Now, this has been a long episode. It has been a long day. My voice is running low, but I just wanted to thank all my members. Thank you. You contribute to the plant fund behind me. I've got a new plant. You see, it's a nice big one. And I'd also like to thank all my viewers and all my subscribers. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. And as we have seen, it is dangerous out there. So remember to always watch your back.